Thank you for joining the Empowered Podcast. Yes, you are in the right place. No, you did not hit the wrong button on your player. My name is Ashley. I am Ellory's wife, and we are doing something a little different today. I'm going to be interviewing him instead of him interviewing some other guest or talking to you himself. I'm going to be asking him some questions, and he's going to be kind of taking us through our story from the beginning, I guess, of how he ended up becoming an entrepreneur. So, Ellory, why don't you tell us why we decided to do this?
It's a good question. When we went to Podcast Movement 14, that was just in the middle of August, and it's the idea of sharing my story about how it came to be that I was no longer working at the company that I worked for. Sharing the ins and outs of that is somewhat scary for me. Just how things happen, the build up over time, just the actual events that led to the result of me being a full-time entrepreneur, full-time podcaster and blogger. The details of that are sharing that. The act of sharing that is somewhat scary. Yeah. And whenever you share those things that are a look into I don't want to say the deepest part of you, because that sounds a little bit corny, but anyway, we were a podcast movement, and just through the series of events or some of the keynotes, some of the sessions, it really brought things to the top of mind that I need to share this. I need to just bite the bullet and share my story so someone can relate to it maybe. And I don't want to say necessarily that I feel like I've been lying about things, but I've gotten a lot of maybe undue credit of just taking this plunge, just having the courage to leave the job and start this thing on my own, this self-belief that I could do it. And that's really not the case. And, just through the process of going through the podcast movement and some of the questions that the speakers posed, I felt like it was about time. Plus, we're coming up on a milestone with the podcast. We've come up with 50 episodes or so. Mm-hmm. And that's so many hours of content, and I've met some incredible people through the process. But I wanted to be open and transparent with people so that they wouldn't think, I've got to have the same level of courage, or I've got to have the same level of, whatever, to be able to make that plunge. And, that I just want to share that, and hopefully people will come away with it or come away from it encouraged.
Yeah. And I think you are really passionate about this subject, and I see that passion all the time, but I think a lot of people don't truly understand how deep that passion really goes and why you're so passionate about helping people get away from feeling trapped in their jobs and being unhappy. And I think it's important for your listeners to really understand that you do know exactly where they're coming from.
Yeah, I been there in a lot of different ways. I've seen the good and the bad of working for somebody else, for large companies and for a couple small companies. And,
right.
I hope after this episode, people can relate to me even more. I think that's the end goal. Is I want to connect at an even deeper level with people who listen to the show or read the blog. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's kind of dive in, I guess. I'll give you guys a little bit of a short background. We were living up in the Dallas area. We both grew up there, and we had been living up there for a few years. I was working at a daycare, and Ellory had been laid off, which most of you guys know that story. He'd only been working at a tech company for a few months, got laid off, ended up working at a marketing firm, sort of. Been there a couple months, was really unhappy, and was actively looking for a new job. And 2 weeks after we got engaged, he found out that he got a job down here in Austin. And it was for this huge company, and it was very exciting. It was a big raise, and we were finally going to have money and be able to support ourselves and get married and have the quote American dream. And Ellory, how did you feel when we first made that move?
Well, when I took my first big corporate job after college, it was a few years after college, I really felt like I'd made it. I was, 26 or 27 at the time. But whenever we moved down here after being laid off and working a crappy job, I was able to get back to where I could talk about technology a lot. And
yeah,
I mean, and a lot of people know. I like gadgets and toys and PlayStations and Xboxes and computers and stuff like that. And this new job was going to be able to let me talk about that. And I was going to be making good money. And I've since learned, money's not everything, but making pretty good money. And I saw it as a way for you and I to kind of move forward with things. I'd put things you didn't know. I'd put things on hold for a while after I'd gotten laid off, and this was a way for us for me to do something that I wanted to do, make more money than I'd ever made,
right?
And for us to move forward with our lives and get married and buy toys and like you said, kind of the what I thought was the American dream at the time. Yeah.
So what were the first couple years like at this corporate job for you?
Oh, it was good. I mean, from the very first, we were in halves, so we didn't do, quarters or anything like that for our fiscal years. We did halves, and every half for the first, 4 years, but specifically the first two, I started off immediately successful. I was always hitting my numbers. I was meeting new people, and at the time, actually, the company was doing really well. When I started, it was in October, and I remember thinking how cool it was because we got lunch catered every day.
Yeah.
From some restaurant in the area, barbecue, pizza, all this stuff every single day. Lunch was catered in. I thought it was just the coolest thing, the most fantastic thing. I was hitting my number. I was getting commission checks.
What was the atmosphere like?
It was very happy at the company. It was very happy. A lot of people liked University of Texas football. And so every Friday, people would be wearing those stupid burnt orange T-shirts and jerseys. And as a Baylor fan and alumni, that you just kind of learn to deal with it. But we got lunch catered in. I was making money. Everybody was happy. The company's numbers were up. The market, was kind of, I don't want to say it was rebounding from 2007, 2008, but it hadn't really hit the tech sector yet, I guess. Right. People were still buying things, or we were just now seeing the results of reps before me. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of success, and a lot of people were successful, not just me, but we were very happy. And
I remember you'd only been there 6 months maybe, and we had they threw a party.
Oh yeah.
This huge Vegas style party, and they rented out the basically bottom floor of a hotel, and all the spouses got to come, and it was a nice catered dinner, and they gave away vacations and TVs and computers, and
yeah, that's where we got the laptop that we gave Kels.
Yep.
My sister, everybody.
And I remember it seemed like a really happy place. Everybody seemed happy. They seemed to really care about their employees. They seemed to really care about the corporate environment. And I guess it was about that time we bought the house.
That was about 6 months before we decided to do that. We weren't quite married. That was a Christmas party, and we got married at the end of January, and we started house shopping in June of 2010.
Okay. But still, those first 2 years were still really...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely definitely during that first 2 years.
So do you remember a point where things started to change for you?
Actually, I do. When I've talked about this a couple of times, but I would say my I don't want to say my attitude, but my perception of how things were going started to change when I started focusing on personal development that was outside of what the company was offering.
Like what?
And just as a side note to that, it's odd that that's when it started, because we'll get to that in a second. That's also
how it ended.
How it ended. Sorry, what was the question? When did it start? Okay, it started when I started focusing on personal development. And
what were you focusing on? How were you focusing on it?
Reading blogs, mostly blogs. Things like Mark and Angel, Forbes, Entrepreneur Inc., some of those kinds of things. Just a lot of leadership type stuff, a lot of productivity, things that I initially started writing about on my blog too. It's where I got the ideas. Mm-hmm. And in January of 2012, the Christmas party we were just talking about was 2010. So fast forward to 2 years later, to January 2012, I started this kind of journey of personal development, and I was taking little snippets of these blog posts that I was reading, mostly online.
Right.
I'd copy and paste the logo and what it was about and a link to it and put it on a one-page PDF, and I just start sending that out to people. It's like, hey, this is really cool. This is what I'm reading. I thought you might enjoy it. And here is here you go. If you want to read it, there's a link. If you don't, there's a little synopsis and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent that over to a guy that I had met at IBM a few years before, and he called me up. It was a Friday, and he said, Ellory, you've inspired me to do something with create something that's greater than myself. And oddly enough, he ended up not doing anything with his ideas, but the fact that I inspired him with just the simple fact of reading and sharing that information, my inspiring of him turned around and inspired me. And that's when I started the blog. But it wasn't just the blog posts that I was reading on all those other websites, but when I started reading books, I think that the wedge between what I saw and what I knew was the better route. The wedge between those things really became wider when I read a couple key books. One was Leadership, and honestly, that might be the key one, because I think that's where I first read about Costco, and I saw how our company was being run.
Good to Great too, right?
I did read that one, but that wasn't in the beginning. That was.
You've read so many.
Something I read with my book club. But in Leadership, I was reading all of these things about how good leadership, how to run a good company, how to treat people.
Right.
And I thought, that's really good. And maybe that's good for Dave Ramsey's company. He's got 300 or 400 people, but I don't know how that scales to a company with 100,000 people.
So do you think that the corporate environment actually started to change, or was it more your mindset, or both at the same time?
I would love for it to say it was the corporate culture.
Yeah. And
that way I don't have to take any responsibility that way. But I think it was a combination of both. I think we as a company, I know the company as a whole had started feeling the impacts of the recession. It was finally hitting the tech sector, and that happened all about the same time as I started doing the personal development. What I realized, again, back to the Leadership thing, was that I didn't know if what Dave was talking about scaled to these these large companies. And then I read the story of Costco and how that company's run. And it's in the 6th or 7th largest retailer in the world, but their companies are paid their employees are paid more. They're on average happier. They have lower turnover rates, and the person who started Costco he's no billionaire. Well, he might be, but he makes like $300,000 or $400,000 a year, and he started the company. And I'm seeing the exact, and Dave's talking about how that's such a great way to run a company. And I'm seeing almost the exact opposite of that.
Right.
So yes, things were happening with the company, stock down or whatever.
There was a lot of leadership changeover at the time too.
Yeah. I don't remember specifically about that. But I'm sure that there's always a lot of turnover there. And so it was a combination of both.
Okay. So that was almost 2 years ago. So I guess
It's about 2.5 now.
Okay. Well, yeah, 2 years before you left. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been 6 months, 7 months since you left.
Well, I mean, it's almost 2 years to the day because I started my blog on January 29th, 2012, and my last day there was January 17th.
Yeah, 2014.
2 years later.
So talk about what ended up leading up to the very end. So some of the, we know that your mindset was changing and you're becoming more and more aware of the things that people were doing wrong, or basically, I mean, they weren't leading the way that good companies should be run. They weren't, even for people who aren't entrepreneurs, as an outsider, I'm not an entrepreneur and I would have been unhappy. Mm-hmm. Just seeing the way that they started treating the employees. There was no more parties. There were no more, I mean, at first it was the spouses weren't invited, and then they weren't even having parties anymore. There was no more catered lunches.
We still had those, and we still had parties, but the people didn't want to go. The attendance on those things dropped, and they became fewer and far between. And that Christmas party we were just talking about,
yeah,
that was, and this was 2009 corporate America, guys. This was an $80,000 party.
Yeah.
We rented out the ballroom at a Marriott, and they were giving away toys, $5,000 travel vouchers. Seriously, it was an $80,000 party. And not that everyone would have to be that way, but just you could just start to feel excitement levels.
Well, and you were in sales, and most people that are in sales are motivated by money and rewards.
That's kind of the saying that it's not all that.
It's not
true,
100% true.
People say that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so back on track. So what happened between when things started going bad up until right close to the end?
So when things started to change, I applied for a couple jobs. I applied for a management position, which we'll touch on again. I know. I applied for a job that I would have gotten if the team had actually been created.
Right.
So I kind of got beaten down on that one. I also started a book club. I felt like I could take what I was doing online, which, by the way, I was blogging on a fairly regular basis. In 2013, I started the podcast in November. But earlier that year, like May 2013, I started, meeting bloggers and podcasters and really building a network and community of people who are following their dreams. But before that, even I had started this book club, and one of the people who came to this book club on a regular basis was a friend of mine.
Peer. A peer.
A peer, yes. He was a peer. We were on, I was trying to think of a name to make up, and so I thought you said Pierre. I was like, well, that's unique. I guess we can
go with that.
We can call him Pierre. And a peer of mine, we were on the same team. He started coming to these book club meetings, and that's where we read Good to Great. That's where we read The 17 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, where we read read 2 or 3 Maxwell books. We read, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. All of these leadership / personal development books. None of them were entrepreneur books, but they were all about good ways to be a leader. And this guy came and he participated and he was active and he was supportive, but at the same time we would, and I tried to keep the conversations positive, but we would on a regular basis inevitably start complaining.
Yeah.
How things were run, how things should be run. Mm-hmm. And it was not just employees complaining, but it was employees complaining, but we had a blueprint for a better way. So it's not like, man, this cake sucks, but it's, man, this cake sucks, and I'm looking at a beautiful cake and it tastes good too. So it's not like
with the recipe right next to it.
Exactly, with the recipe. So we did this for a solid 12 months, me and this peer and a handful of other people,
right,
reading books. We would meet every week and we would read, discuss, and kind of lick our wounds a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And
you did this on company time, right?
No, we did that on a lunch break. I mean, you were at, it wasn't like a happy hour or something like that. It was there at, it was 1 hour. It was like noon to 1 during the lunch break. We borrowed a conference room, but I mean,
right,
we weren't in anybody's way. We did everything officially, whatever. And, everybody in the department for the most part knew what I was doing. No one said, no, this isn't a good idea or anything like that.
Well, and you had even had approval from managers. I know because we had talked about it.
Yeah, I did. And I vaguely remember asking, hey, do you think this is a good idea? And a lot of them said it's a fantastic idea. And actually, some managers came. I remember that now.
Managers from other teams were coming to your book club.
Yeah. So it wasn't just sales reps, but it was sales managers as well. So I had forgotten that. Anyway, so fast forward, we're doing the book club. I'm blogging on a regular basis. I start the podcast. Or I hadn't quite started the podcast yet. And then about May of 2013 or so, I don't remember the exact time.
Yeah, that's about right. That summer.
Well, I'm trying to remember when I applied for the sales manager position.
I don't know.
It was spring, early summer of 2013. And me and this peer, who is roughly 10 years older than me, and a bunch of other people, by the way, a bunch of people, including me and my peer, we all applied for this position. And I have to mention this because I think this is important as far as it applies to the overall situation. Me and the same peer, we're good friends.
Yeah, he was at our house.
We were very good friends. And we fundamentally saw business being done in different ways. I was all about teaching my customers how to fish. He was all about giving them the fish and probably filleting it and frying it too. And that was one of the reasons why I was so successful is I didn't treat them like idiots. I showed them how to do it.
Right.
And for 4 years, my average attainment over a 4-year period, ups and downs in the market, account set changes, all of that was like 130%.
And most of your accounts for 3 of those 4 years were in California. The market was terrible.
Yeah, for 4 years, for all 4 years, they were all in California, which was the brokest state in the country, and they were in LA County, which was the brokest county in the brokest state. So I was a very high achiever. And so me and this peer talked about doing business in polar opposite ways.
Right.
He was moderately successful. I was extremely successful. Mm-hmm. And so that plays into what happens next. We apply for this management job, this management position, and he gets it.
Right.
And I don't. Okay, cool. It's fine. Not a problem at all. For 6 months, it really was.
Well, and not just a management position, but a management over the team that you were both just on. So he went from being a peer to now being your boss.
And honestly, I had no problem with that. However, I did start seeing immediate signs that he had a problem with it, because not only did he become my manager, but I took over his account set.
Right. So you have all his old customers too.
I had all of his old customers, and we just come just a few months off of us discussing how we would decide to do business differently. So then on top of all of that, the quarter that I take over, the quarter after I take over, I get the highest attainment in our entire team.
Right.
So not only do I do business differently, but I take over an account set and run it in a different way and have more success than he had in a very, very long time.
Right.
So it's just...
Which would chap anybody's shorts.
Yeah. But I remember actually the just a couple weeks after taking over that account set, he comes by my desk and he says, Ellory, I think you're doing, and I don't know where this came from. I really don't. He said something I wish I could remember, but he said something to the effect of, your year-over-year numbers are down. Your sales numbers are down. I think it might have to do with the way that you're doing business. I don't think it's right for your customers. And he just kind of dropped that deuce on me and then left. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? And me being the analytics guy, the numbers guy, I kept spreadsheet upon spreadsheet.
Right.
I looked it up, and nothing that he said was true.
Yeah.
And I backed it up with numbers. And so I didn't understand. And this was just a few months before I hit the highest attainment on the entire team.
Right.
And so he says that in like May or April or something. Then we go into October, and he pulls me into a team meeting, or a team room.
Conference room.
Yeah, a little tiny 3 or 4 person conference room. And he says, by the way, and he gets on the speakerphone with someone in our legal and HR department. I was like, well, sweet, this is it. This is how it all ends. And
yeah, I remember you actually texted me that day and said I might be getting fired.
Yeah, I thought I was.
Yeah.
So at this company, they measure everything, talk
right.
time, the number of outbound calls that we make, the amount of time we're on the phone, inbound calls, days, all of this stuff, which is just gets in the way. It's just noise. It's just stupid stuff. And they said, we notice, Ellory, that you've got 2 spikes on your phone time for the last 2 Mondays. We want to know if you have any explanation for that. And it's like, how much more could you be put on the spot?
Right.
It was really weird. Long story short, I had a 100% clean record and fully justified in what I was doing.
Yeah, there were training calls
on the phone. There was training calls. Our team, it's Monday. It's Monday in corporate America. It's
right.
your busiest day.
Yeah.
And they later said, after we had this call, the spikes dropped off, blah, blah, blah. And little did I know that my name was now in a human resources file somewhere.
You'd been flagged.
I even followed up with my peer turned manager a couple weeks later, and I said, hey, just wanted to follow up. Is there anything, what's going on here? Because I'd been dying inside for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Thinking any day the hammer's going to come.
Right.
Any day.
Right.
And it didn't. I was totally cleared, or so I was told.
At the time you were cleared, quote unquote.
At the time I was cleared. And that was, I think, in October, that rings a bell, I think, October of 2013. In November, I go to the Platform Conference in Dallas.
Yep. And
that's where I met some of my really good friends. Met him, period. James Kinson I didn't even know who he was until then.
Oh, James.
And I met Alex Harris there.
Yep.
I met Jared Easley in person at Platform. And that's when I really realized just how cool conferences were. That's where I interviewed Cliff Ravenscraft and Amy Porterfield and got them on the podcast. Mm-hmm. It was the beginning of November, and my podcast launched November 15th.
Right.
And so that's that timeline there. And then December, I got called in for our quarterly meeting. I got called as the rep of the quarter for our team.
Right.
So October, Ellory, you're terrible.
You have too much phone time.
But we're gonna find you completely innocent. And then a couple months later, I'm sales rep of the quarter, and lo and behold, I get moved to an entirely new account set in an entirely different state that has different contract codes, different rules, different regulations, and people I'd never talked to. Mm-hmm. With a new account team, people I'd never worked with either internally to the company.
Yeah.
Well, that was December. And a couple months before that, and this is where it gets my story gets personal because all of this other stuff kind of brags on me. It's me tooting my own horn to some extent.
It is.
It's all true. None of it's an exaggeration, but it's me saying, "Hey, I did awesome at sales.
Right.
I was kicking butt." Well,
and even when you hated your job, you were so good at
it. Yeah.
Well, and let me pause you for just a second, because you and I had talked basically for 2 years about should you look for another job somewhere else? So a lot of the people that you had been working with when you started had since left. Most of them had left the company. Some of them had gone internally to other places, but you were one of the only people left that had started with you. And you and I had talked several times about, you're unhappy. Should you try to find another job? Should you keep applying for other positions within the company? And it always came back to, well, I could do my job in my sleep. It's good money. I get good commissions. I can leave my work, come home and not think about work. It's just not worth the trouble. And then after you started the blog and really, really started working on the blog and getting excited about it and connecting with other people, it became, well, I can work from home 2 days a week and do a podcast interview during my lunch break.
Yep.
And I still do my job in my sleep, and I can come home and work on the website and work on the podcast, and I can get up early in the morning and work, and I don't have to worry about making a good impression at a new job. Or, we had talked about eventually leaving this corporate job and eventually being able to go out on your own, but we were trying to do it the quote right way and rev up your website to be making money to replace your income. And you didn't want to go to another job where you felt like you would need to give 18 months commitment, basically, when you start a new job. You didn't want to have to do that. And that was something that we talked and prayed about. Should you leave because you were really unhappy? And I could see that you were unhappy. And that was something that we both, I think, struggled with, trying to decide what was the best decision for our family. And that was hard. It was hard for me as your wife to see you so unhappy, but not being able to do anything about it. And being scared to say, just quit your job and we'll figure it out. That was hard for me to not feel like I had the courage to say that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a little bit more background from us.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to make it a long transition. I think I wrote a blog post called Runways, On-Ramps, and Personal Growth. And when I wrote it, it was, the version that saw the light of day was about personal development. What I had in my head was get out of job. And and I didn't write that because I had a fear of writing something that would get me fired. As I say,
which we talked about a lot. We talked about almost every blog post. Okay, is this something that is gonna be looked poorly upon from your corporate job? Are people gonna start thinking that you're done at your corporate job and fire you because you're more passionate about something else? Yeah,
we did.
And we censored some of your stuff. I mean, there was some stuff that you decided not to post because of that.
Yeah. I've got three blog posts in a draft. I still haven't published them, but they're less relevant now.
Right.
They're less relevant. But yeah, I remember probably a dozen blog posts that were not exactly what I wanted to write out of fear of some sort of repercussions. Or something like that.
Well, so let's fast forward just a little. So this was all at the end of 2013. Mm-hmm. Beginning of 2014, we go to Vegas in MX. And that pretty much just solidified everything for you, that corporate America is not your end game.
That's a good way of putting it.
And how the hell can I get out as fast as possible?
Well, I'd been surrounding myself with bloggers and podcasters and new media people for a couple of years. Let's talk about what that did for you, though, because you didn't go to platform with me.
Right.
You read most of my blogs. I know you don't even read all of them. Maybe
I may not read them right when they come out, but eventually I catch up and I read them all.
There you go. So, What was New Media Expo like for you? We fly into Vegas and we spend 3 days with people who are bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers, people who have either escaped their corporate prison or are wanting to as bad as I am. So what was that like for you?
Oh, try not to get emotional. It was special to me to see you so happy and in your element. And, I've known you for 12 years, but I never seen you so confident and so social.
Yeah.
And just happy. I mean, you were just so happy, and it had been 2 years since I'd seen you at all happy, but I don't think I'd ever seen you like that. And that was something that we could talk to her blue in the face, and I couldn't have, without experiencing it firsthand, I would never have realized that. And, if I hadn't have gone, I don't know if I would still realize that.
If you hadn't have gone, I don't know if I can claim this, but if you hadn't have gone to New Media Expo, I'd probably still be I'd be back in another corporate job right now.
Yeah,
Because we saw, and I've talked about this on other people's shows and interviews, how having you there at New Media Expo and just recently at Podcast Movement, that's one of the best business decisions as far as not being all full corporate, being an entrepreneur, starting to create something from scratch. Having you there is one of those best decisions, because I saw that you saw it's not people on Skype or behind a keyboard and screen and a blog 1,000 miles away, that there were real people there.
Yeah.
And that there was real connections there. And I knew that you were getting that kind of experience in there. And that was a pivotal moment, I think, for us. I know it was for me. I think for us and for us individually as well.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons why I'm such a huge advocate and fan of people going to conferences, period. And I saw people who brought their spouse to New Media Expo, but they didn't attend. They didn't even go to the meetups, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
And you were right there every step of the way, going to all of the meetups, meeting the same people.
Yeah.
Kind of being a networker for me when I was talking to somebody else, passing out business cards, but you were an equal partner with that. And I don't know, if you hadn't gone, do you think I would have gone? Do you think?
I don't know, but our marriage is special, and I think we are unique in that we don't do anything without the other. We've always been that way.
You go to the gym without me.
Well, that's your choice, not because you're not invited. But I can't fathom not doing it with you. And I think if I had been, what's the word? Disassociated with the process, I think that you leaving corporate would have been a much bigger strain on our marriage.
Yeah. I think an NMX for you might have been one of the first looks at a world that was outside of the big business structure, because together that's all we'd known while we were married. Plus, you've worked at some big companies and some small companies. But all of a sudden, instead of, Ellory is blogging, Ellory wants to start a podcast because he's heard John Dumas is, making a boatload of money. All of a sudden, you get to meet John Dumas. You get to meet all of these.
Which I still have not met John Lee Dumas.
You didn't meet him?
Nope.
Oh. Never mind.
The one person I still haven't met.
But that's where you and I met Chris Brogan. But we saw all these people.
Pat Flynn.
And Pat Flynn, just people who it's no longer theory. It's real people who who you saw and I saw. People we'd looked up to or I'd looked up to online and at least talked about, hey, this is possible. This is something cool that Pat's doing, or this is something cool that John's doing, or I just listened to this episode with Michael Hyatt, or I just listened to Starve the Doubts and this is what they talked about. Yeah. All of a sudden we get to meet those people and see the results of these kind of digital actions.
Yeah.
When we're talking digital media and online products, oftentimes there's very little physical. But it's not like you click the buy button and something shows up at your door a few days later. So it's almost kind of like the boiler room where it could be fake. It's not, but being able to meet those people in person was a big game changer, I think, for us.
Yeah, I agree. So once we got back from NMX, you're on that conference high and you immediately had to go back to corporate job.
Oh yeah, like the
next day.
Was it the next day?
I think so.
No. It was a work from home day the next day. I remember.
Yeah. So what, like 2 weeks later?
So NMX was the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and my last day was on the 17th.
So, okay, so let's go to your last week at this corporate job.
Okay.
Okay. I guess let me just preface this by saying, when was the opt-out?
Oh, so in December, this company was doing a voluntary separation program where essentially you could lay yourself off.
Right.
You could opt for that. You could lay yourself off, get severance package, all the normal layoff things. You elected to do it instead of the company voluntarily.
Because they were basically saying, we're going to end up laying some people off. We're giving you this option. And it was like, I don't know, like, I think we figured out that you would have ended up with like 4 months. Ended up being total, I think, 6 months paid.
Yeah, I was looking at $35,000-$40,000 in severance.
Yeah, I think it was maybe even more than that. But you and I talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And
well, let's look at it, because someone might be in the same position, or not the voluntary part, but they might be just coming off of a layoff, and this is directly applicable to them. We said no.
Yeah.
We chose for me to not take that.
Right.
Because fear.
It 100% was fear. Yeah.
It was fear that I couldn't ramp my business enough to scale to replace my income in the amount of time it would take before we would have spent all of my severance.
Well, and it was also, I think at the time you look at, well, this is you were making X amount of money plus commissions, and we needed to replace that income 100% in order for you to leave, which is stupid because we didn't have to do that. We could have made that 6 months worth of salary last a year.
Well, knowing what we know now, we could have made it last
a lot longer than that.
A lot longer than that.
Yeah. But, if you are in that situation where you just get got laid off and you have a couple months of salary or whatever, don't freak out because you can cut back on some things, cut back on the number of channels you have on cable, cut back on your cell phone plan. Don't go out to eat or go to the movies. We don't go to the movies like we used to. But it was totally fear that we didn't take that. So anyway, okay, back to the last week.
So there was the reason why you asked that is we want to show that there was a window that you could accept. You could volunteer for this VSP from basically December 15th to the end of December-ish. They give us maybe a whole month. There might have been a whole month.
I think it was a month, yeah.
Well, with being in corporate America, I got a whole week off for Christmas.
Right.
I came back for like a day or something and then went to New Media Expo. I came back, and where do you want to pick up?
Just the last week. So that call you got while you're working from home.
So on Tuesday, I was working from home on a Tuesday and I work from home on a Thursday. So actually, let me go back 1 week before, so not the week of, but I got called on the phone by this peer turned manager, who had called me in for no reason in October with these spikes that I was found innocent of, who had made these comments about the bad ways I was doing business just a week after he took over. And he says, Ellory, I had just gotten moved to this new state, new account team,
right.
New rules, new regulations, different part of the business. He says, Ellory, your year-over-year numbers are down again. Or he didn't say again, but by the way, it was again. It was down before I had the best year ever. So he says, your numbers are down, blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of curious to see how we can improve. Now, not that veterans are the best, but I'd been on this team
for 4 years,
for longer than almost everybody on the team, and
right.
One of the more senior members in the entire department. So he says, hey, we want to look at this. That was a Tuesday or a Thursday. So then it's the Tuesday of my last week.
Yeah.
And he says,
he calls you.
He calls me again working from home. And he says, Ellory, I want to play something for you. And I said, okay. And he pressed play on this recorder because all of our calls were recorded.
Right.
And I immediately knew what the recording was because I recognized the guy's voice. And it was a training call that I had taken from my work phone that Jeff Goins was leading.
Right.
It was how to sell your first 100 books or whatever, and how you can basically that strategy of how to do that as from the perspective of an author.
Right.
And he didn't have to play it for very long. I recognized Jeff's voice immediately, and I said, yeah, I know what that is. And he asked me a few questions. I'm trying to remember all of the details. And at some point I said, yeah, it's probably on the more personal side, than corporate, than business side. I could have argued that it was on a lunch break, but it wouldn't have made any difference knowing what that he had been building this case against me for about 14 or 15 months. So it wouldn't have made any difference. So that was Tuesday, and that, I don't remember the whole conversation. I do remember saying it was probably more of a personal call than a work-related call.
Yeah. And then it the next day he said, we need to have a meeting on Friday.
No, that was Thursday. So that was Tuesday. On Wednesday, I went into the office. He didn't say a word to me. It was not the first time, but he did have more than once. But I mean, who would want to say hello to my shining face?
I know, right?
So Wednesday we didn't say a word to each other. It was kind of awkward. I don't want to call it cowardice, although I really want to because I'm not all that happy about it. But he avoided me Wednesday, and he called me Thursday back when I was working from home. He called me on the phone. And by the way, all of these were recorded, and there were third parties on the call listening in from the Human Resources Department.
Which you didn't know at the time.
I didn't, And he said, "Hey, Ellory, we'd like to, we want to schedule a meeting with you at 9:00 on Friday," which is the next day.
Right.
And at that point, it was like, watching paint dry is not the right thing, but it was like watching a train coming at you.
Yeah.
I was 99% sure that I was about to get canned.
And that's what you told me when I got home.
Oh yeah, here's this gift.
Yeah.
Been working all day. Oh, by the way, I think I'm gonna get shit canned tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I went to work at.
Hang on, I want to talk about our conversation Thursday night.
Okay.
Because I was still.
Oh yeah.
Scared.
You were freaking out.
Yeah,
We both were.
You held it together way better than I did. Probably because I was freaking out. You basically I came home and you basically, you told me about the call on Tuesday. So you're kind of nervous. And then you told me that you had a meeting with him on Friday and you said, yeah, this is probably going to be it. I'm probably getting fired tomorrow. So I immediately start crying and thinking that the world's over. And I don't know what book you had read. What book was that from?
4-Hour Work Week.
Okay, so there was this long, 10 questionnaire.
Or 7 questions about
okay, 7.
if things fall off the deep end, how you would handle it.
Yeah. So, and it was basically like, okay, so if you make the decision to do whatever it is you're going to do, the first question I think was, what is the worst that can happen? So of course, I if you don't know me, I get anxiety really bad, and
even if you do know, you still get anxiety really bad.
I worry enough for everyone. And
that's why I had to keep it together.
You did.
If I lost it,
oh yeah,
you would have spiraled off and.
Oh yeah, then who knows? Yeah, it would have been worse. But you made me answer these questions. So the first one says, "What's the worst that can happen?" Well, I wrote a page, people, like a page of we're gonna lose the house, we're gonna end up having to move in with my parents. Yeah, it's funny now, but at the time it was very real to me because I had a job, but I was only working a few days a week, and
you had 2 jobs working.
I had 2 jobs. But
it's not like you were working 80 hours a week.
But in my head, no, it was 2 jobs that made up almost full-time job. 1 almost full-time job. Yeah. But in my head, I wasn't seeing what I was bringing to the table because at the time, my income was our fun money. It was our vacation money. It was our go to the movies money. It was buy new clothes, that kind of thing. And so what I saw was we're losing the money that pays the bills. And that's when I, freaked out. And, we went through this questionnaire about, okay, so these are the worst things that could happen. And I don't even remember that.
Well, there's one question. What is the worst that could happen? And if what you think the events leading up to this worst case scenario would have happened, how could you basically get the ship righted and not keep it from completely sinking? And that's where I answer questions like, well, I'm physically able. I could go and I could work at Lowe's or Home Depot. I could, load trucks or move
Which,
mulch.
Of course, made me cry because I'm like, I can't imagine my sweet husband having to go work at freaking Lowe's so that I can have a house. Like, that sounds so superficial and stupid. And I remember you saying to me, and you've said it even since, that you would sell your car. And if you have seen Ellory since he got his car or have ever talked to him about his car, that is his prized possession. He loves that car. It's his dream car. When we bought that car, we decided to get the car he wanted because it was his dream car. And for him to say to me, I will sell my car if I have to.
So that I don't have to go back and work for somebody else.
Yeah. I knew that I couldn't fight it. And I knew that you were serious. And if you were willing to sacrifice something so big, then I could sacrifice some clothes and some movies and maybe some cable shows. So anyway, we had a long conversation that night, and we had both been pretty much prepared. And I got all my tears out Thursday night. Well, maybe not all of them, but
all
most
of them until the next time.
Most of them. Yeah, so take us into Friday morning, which is pretty obvious by now, I guess.
Well, as I try to do with most things, I think about it from every angle, and I was 99% sure that I was going to get fired.
Yeah.
Not let go, not laid off, not terminated or separated, I think was the word used, but fired.
Or given the option to quit.
Or given, and that's what really pissed us off, because this Jeff Goins call was 2 or 3 months before
October, yeah. And
not one of those Mondays, by the way, with the spikes. But I don't remember exactly when it was, but they were way before, and I was told all of this stuff happened just like a week after the VSP, this voluntary layoff thing, that period that you could volunteer for that ended. And so this boss went back 3 months and found something and told me about it and raised the issue a week after I could have been said. It
makes my blood pressure get up just thinking about it all over again.
Yeah. So I get there early. I dock my computer, and I'm ignored. And I again 99% sure. And I told I was there early.
Yeah.
And I told a few key people that actually I'd been keeping a few key people in the loop for the last 6 months. I told them about the conversation at my desk about me sucking at life and business and yada yada, and the tiny events that left up, even being called into about the phone spikes. Yeah. So I told them, I said, hey, I think I'm going to get fired tomorrow. And then that morning I said, hey, I probably won't be here very long today.
Yeah.
And he found me doing whatever. And so we walked into one of these little team conference private rooms, and the HR person is already on the phone. Another manager is sitting at the desk table there, and we sit down. And my boss, former friend and peer and confidant, says, Ellory, we're here to talk about your separation from the company. And I argued with them. They said it all. They brought up the phone spikes. The HR is like, well, you already have a history of doing bad things. And I said, no. I was found completely innocent of that.
Right.
Back whenever it happened. That shouldn't be taken into effect. But again, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I now had a file with human resources. And I even argued, and I still believe this, that me pushing the envelope and doing all of these extra trainings are what made me the most successful person in the department.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that while I was there got rep of the year for the entire department and sales rep of the quarter. There were people who got both, one or the other, but nobody that got both. I got the bronze award for the entire company for contributions to the department. Nobody had the success or the decorations that I had.
Right.
And I made that argument. I said, one of the reasons why I'm so stinking successful is because of all of the training that I do, and it got me nowhere. The decision was
the
already
decision
made.
was done.
Nothing that I mean, they practically had the paperwork there, and I was back so that started at 9:00, and I was back in my car at 9:12. At least that's when the text message that I sent Ashley and my good friend Jason hit it at 9:12, and I was escorted out of the building as if I had stolen corporate secrets and sold them to a competitor.
Oh yeah, we got a box in the mail. Like
I couldn't
later.
even box up my desk. I couldn't do anything. No pens or breath mints or staplers or anything like that. I was no security guard, but this manager was there. Let's go. Took my badge. I mean, that's normal, but. And that's it, guys. That's what I've been
holding back.
Honestly, now that I say it, it seems almost stupid. But I was so worried about losing credibility, and instead of me saying I've got the balls to quit, and jump in with both feet and pursue my dream, and then turn around and tell other people to do the same, it felt very inauthentic. And I hope I never claimed to have quit. I just started saying when I left, and I did technically leave, but
yeah. Well, it was hard because we didn't know what was going to happen, and we talked about getting a lawyer, and we talked about wrongful termination, and because Texas is a no-fault state, they basically can fire you for whatever the hell they want. And because of that, you couldn't get unemployment, and we appealed that process and
two or three times.
And because of those two things, we kind of had to be tight-lipped about things until we found out what really was going to happen.
Yeah, I didn't want to say something and then somebody maybe hear about it through the appeals process or something, and have something taken out of context or whatever. But yeah, I appealed it 2 or 3 times.
So let's move from storytelling to a little bit deeper-ish, I guess. How do you feel now?
Well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
Well, how do you feel 6 months later about being out of corporate?
I feel lighter.
Well, you have lost 10 pounds.
Yeah, I have lost 10 pounds, but I feel like there was such a weight of going into a place where I was miserable every day for 2 years.
Yeah.
And trying to put on a smiley face, not saying what I really thought about how poorly things were run, how terribly people were treated, and being very inauthentic for 2 years. And the stress is different. I don't have knots in my stomach and feel sick to log into my computer.
I remember I guess it was the next Monday after you got fired. I asked you, I was like, well, how do you feel? And I remember you saying to me, I finally don't feel nauseous when I get up this morning. And that Sunday night you said, I feel like I can sleep tonight. I don't have knots in my stomach, and I don't feel a weight on my shoulders anymore. And I didn't know until that point how bad it really was, because you hid some of that from me. I knew you were unhappy and I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize that it was actually affecting your health. And you dropped 10 pounds in 3 weeks.
Well, I don't know if it was that fast.
Yeah, I mean, it was quick.
Yeah. I guess so. But it was a lot better. I didn't feel bad anymore. I didn't feel sick. I felt relieved. I felt really pissed off because I felt like I'd gotten 40 grand stolen from me.
You and me both, my friend.
That's why we pursued some of that, the appeals process and looked at getting an attorney, because I had a perfect track record. I'd had more awards than anybody else, or I thought it was a perfect track record. But again, that HR file came back.
Well, and I remember saying, you better warn everybody else there not to ever talk to their spouse or anyone else on the phone.
Yeah, we never talked.
No, but I mean, a lot of people did.
And part of the corporate code of conduct, and if you're in corporate America, you might want to, if you've made it this far, you might want to listen, because there's a clause in our corporate code of conduct that says business equipment, corporate assets is the technical term. Corporate assets can be used for limited personal use.
Limited is just
what is limited personal use? I do one phone call over 4 years, and people are talking to their aunts and uncles and wives and ex-husbands for 20 or 30 minutes every few days. Didn't get me anywhere. And I wanted to share this story just again because as much as I would love to be the type that has all of the answers and knows how to do things, and I've done a lot of research, but I felt guilty about portraying myself as someone who had the guts to jump in the faith that things would all work out.
Well, and I think, when we were talking at Podcast Movement, specifically with Mark Mason, is when I kind of had this revelation, and you and I talked about it later, that this is what needed to happen, that you are extremely passionate about helping people get to a place where they can leave corporate America if that's what they want to do. And this is why. Because you have not, there are people out there that are made for corporate America, that excel in it, that live for it, that love it. Well,
I did for 2 years.
You did. And there are some people that God has prepared them to work in corporate America. And that's where they will shine. But there are a lot of people out there who are in positions just like you.
And what's weird, you said, I didn't. When do you think we started considering me as an entrepreneur? I've been asked that question. When did you realize you were an entrepreneur? And
I think you've always been. Because
I don't even know. I mean, I've told a couple people, and if Kelsey listens to this, she might remember we started a detective agency on the street, and I don't even remember what the little software was, but we printed off little business cards, and we would find cats and stupid crap. Word. No, Word wasn't around back then. It was a Corel something. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know if you can call that being an entrepreneur or just having an imagination as a, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid or something. But I've been asked, when did I realize or know that I was an entrepreneur? And I don't know that it was a light switch, or even if there is a gradual process. I don't know when that process started.
Yeah.
Either, unless maybe it goes back to the blog and reading EntreLeadership and some of these other things. 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller.
But honey, you were reading personal development books before you ever even worked at IBM.
Not like this.
Not that many, but I remember you reading.
In 2012, I read 18 different books.
Yes, but I remember, where is it? How to Win Friends
and Influence People.
And Robert Kiyosaki book.
Think and Grow Rich. You read that. Yeah, but that was like one a year.
Okay.
You're right.
I've read half of one book my entire life that's around personal development.
But you don't have to have an entrepreneur mindset to read most of the books.
But people that read those books have an entrepreneur mindset. People don't read those books because they're trying to get a promotion at work.
That's probably true.
Otherwise, because those kind of books put you in a mindset like you were in 2 years ago, unless you work at a place that's doing it right. But anyway, we probably need to wrap up. But I just want to ask you a couple more questions really quick. What did you learn from this experience?
As a whole?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that if you are working for somebody else, you have put your fate, your financial, your family's fate and future in the hands of one person. Whether that person likes you, which all of my other bosses did, or it's someone who doesn't like you, which the one who finally kicked me out did not like me. Whatever the case is, if you work for a boss, a company, you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. And somebody can knock your basket over just like that. And if you go for the promotion or the raise, and by the way, as an testament to the, just so I'm not making it, I got the highest raises on the team. I was in the top 3 every single year. So again, continuous reinforcement of a job well done. And every time I went for those, I was just becoming more and more vested in my eggs being in their basket. So if I got a $3,000 raise, we went out to eat more. We went to the movies more. I bought more video games, enjoyed more cigars or whatever. So I just became more reliant on someone other than myself. And if we go for these raises and promotions, all we are doing is taking our eggs from one basket and moving them to a new basket that's larger or fancier or can hold a few more eggs. It's still in that same precarious position as before. It's just newer, bigger, and fancier. And there's just as much risk in putting your full faith in somebody else than there is putting all of your faith in your own ability to earn or start something on your own. So that's not the lesson that you thought I had learned.
Well, I mean, I knew that's kind of what your big.
That's not what you were asking.
No, it is. I don't believe, and this is me talking, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I don't believe that everyone is made out to be an entrepreneur.
I agree. A lot of people aren't. So
what do you say to those people who aren't entrepreneurs?
Well, it doesn't change the fact.
I agree.
It's still 100% true. But
so they're just destined to always put their eggs in somebody's basket?
Sort of. But you can be constantly increasing your own value. And I had increased my value a lot, but they just didn't give a crap.
Right.
They probably replaced me with somebody who made half of what I was making.
Oh, I'm sure.
Whereas
somebody who was 22 right out of college, too.
Probably. And I wouldn't be surprised if I ran into him on LinkedIn just the other day. But people like you, by learning these trades, these skills, like what you've done through a technical college on top of your degree, that's highly, highly specialized. I was not highly specialized. I was very good at what I did, but they figured they could save half and get maybe a 20 or 30 or 40% reduction in performance, but they're still saving half. Mm-hmm. And that's how this company would look. So to that person, not
like me, because I love my job.
I just live happy. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. They don't want or has the ability to be. I question my ability to be every day. So
maybe the lesson then is to just have your eyes open.
Yeah, I probably, this is probably the point in the podcast where I should say, if that is you, you are leaving yourself open. And by the way, I have a training course that'll show you how to build an online business. That's probably the answer I should say as a salesperson. But if
that's not the point of the podcast,
it's not. Although it's also true. But you know, for people like you, just, you can be in a highly specialized, and you may not want to be an entrepreneur, but just make sure, do what you like.
Yeah.
Do what you want to do. Be excited to go to the office or log into the computer or go to the hospital where you work, not where you're a patient. But just like what you do. Don't sit there and be miserable for 2 years like I did and just wait for somebody else to give you the axe. Why not build your own on-ramp, scale up your passion, your hobby, or just even grow your network so that if your boss today gets pissed off at you and starts building this campaign to get you out as soon as he can, you have the connections at another company that you could go to and just pick up right where you left off. That's probably the best advice that I could give, is just don't put your eggs in one basket, but you know, have another leg to stand on, have another connection that you can call and say, hey, I need some help. Don't try to go it alone. And above everything else, don't hate your job. And when a previous boss who loved me said this, it was kind of a douchey thing to say, but he said the doors don't lock from the outside, meaning we could leave at any time. And he was kind of saying that as a, you know, if you don't like it, you can leave. That's exactly why he was saying it. If you don't like it, you can leave. Well, take that advice, learn from the crappy message that it sends, and the doors don't lock from the outside. You can leave. Give yourself the ability to,
and the permission.
And great. You've been listening to my podcast, but give yourself the ability and the permission to leave. And I just want to say again, don't do something that you hate doing.
Yeah.
Don't wait until the pain and discomfort gets so freaking bad that getting fired is a blessing.
Yeah. If you have any questions or comments for us, feel free to call us. There's a phone number on the website, or
512-774-4614.
Leave us a voicemail. Leave us a comment, or you can tweet us. I am now on Twitter. Get excited at the Ashley Wells, or you can tweet Ellory at Ellory Wells. That's pretty easy. So, I think this was great, and hopefully people liked it.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. So, thanks for having me on. Thanks for doing the interview and helping me share my story.
Love you, dear.
Love you too.